Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Emily Chang. Emily, you're very welcome to the podcast, and let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself to our international audience here today. So over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Simon, for having me. And I'm so glad to be here. Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Chang. I'm the CEO from McCann World Group in China. And I've spent the last 24 years of my career spanning a number of industries. So I started at Procter& Gamble for 11 years. I transitioned to Apple with an absolutely irresistible offer to lead Asia Pacific retail marketing. And then I had the unique and unexpected opportunity to become the chief commercial officer at Intercontinental Hotels Group, learned a ton in the hospitality world, and then transitioned to the CMO of Starbucks for China. So in total, my career has spanned sort of half of my time in the US, half of my time in China with a British-based company, which gave me the pleasure of traveling quite frequently to London. Now I am working on what we call the agency side, but frankly, I don't know that the world is so linear. You know, people often ask, why are you on the agency side? Was that a strange switch? I don't know if it's really so linear. For instance, when I joined the hospitality industry, people often said, how did you join hospitality? As though it were a special bucket, unique to itself. But every industry has things that, you can learn and things that you can bring as immediate value and its own vocabulary. And I think the opportunity to switch industries is actually wonderful. And it's a privilege that I don't take for granted because you can learn so much more. And now that I'm working at McCann, I feel exactly the same way. Having the opportunity to lead 400 or 500 people who are all creatives, working in a space where we're not asset light, we're asset free. It's all about the people that we have and putting them in work that brings out their very best. That's the most exciting and fulfilling job that I could imagine.
That's an incredible career journey, Emily. And I mean, starting out at Procter& Gamble or P&G, I think, as it is now, that's a great starting point for anybody in this line of work, because that's a huge organization. It's a global powerhouse, and to move from that to, what did you call it, an irresistible opportunity to work with Apple, and that was great in terms of their retail strategy, and of
Mm.
course, International Hotels Group is sorry, Intercontinental Hotels is a significant player around the world. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are familiar with Intercontinental Hotels Group. That's another great organization. Of course, your role as the CMO at Starbucks. I mean, that's a fantastic opportunity, a fantastic career move. And I think you mentioned, didn't you, that being able to move into different areas, whether it's hotels or whether it's the P&G work or whether it's over to, I suppose, the world of Starbucks, it's a very, very great set of experiences that you must have had from that. And then you bring us right up to date with your work in the McCann World Group. And did you say 400 people?
Yes, about 450 people.
About 450 people. That's incredible. And predominantly on the creative side, I mean, what's the kind of work that you're involved in there? What's your core responsibility there? I know you're the CEO, but what are you helping to do at the McCann Worldwide Group?
Well, what we are here to do is to become the trusted partner to our client brands, delivering tailor-made strategy and creative that lands in the China market. What I get the absolute fun job of doing is finding the best people. And in the last 3 years, I've hired 11 out of 14 new senior executives. And I think what's so important is not only finding the right individuals, but nurturing and cultivating the chemistry between them so that we have this sort of unified, passionate, driven leadership team that works together beautifully. So that's been my core piece of work. As we build this new leadership team, what we're trying to do is deliver against that vision. And particularly in China, where technology and digital technology, and particularly in China, where that sort of digital technology keeps leapfrogging, there is such an opportunity to constantly demonstrate agility, learning, and evolution. So we want to become that trusted partner that understands traditional strategy and creative, as well as can constantly pivot into the newest technology and the newest innovation, bringing those fresh ideas to our clients.
Thanks for sharing that, Emily. And whether it's Starbucks or Apple or P&G or IHG or your work now as the CEO of McCann Worldwide Group in China, I mean, it's an incredible career. And I also want to ask you a little bit because I mean, I don't know how you fit it all in, but you're also an adjunct professor. You also, I believe, working closely with the SOS Children's Villages, if I've got that correctly. And you're
Yeah.
also an author, and I want to ask you a little bit about the spare room too. So could you expand on those three areas too? Because I know you're involved in those areas.
One of my team members just asked me the other day, I do these things called leadership snacks for my leadership team. And I do something for MRM, one of my agencies specifically called the Thursday 10. 10 minutes every Thursday, just sort of leadership snacks. And she asked, what are the three things you look for in people that we're hiring? And one of the three things I said was somebody who's interesting. And I think that's something that doesn't always come up, but is so important because if you're interesting, that means you're, first of all, self aware enough to know what feeds you. Second, driven enough to pursue those extracurriculars, and third, passionate and articulate enough to explain what those things are and why they draw you. So, sort of putting my money where my mouth is, I love teaching. I love investing in young people. That is my job all day long. When I got the opportunity to become an adjunct professor at NYU, not just teaching the occasional course as I've done over the years, but actually teaching an entire curriculum. And by the way, writing the curriculum from scratch, I thought that's kind of a big, hairy challenge. It was 2.5 hours every week, the course itself. So it was a pretty significant amount of time. And what an opportunity to build a new curriculum. It was finance for marketing decisions. And I do think that is an area that either veers a little bit too heavily into the finance or relies too heavily on the marketing. So being able to create a syllabus that sort of spanned the two was really a fun intellectual challenge for me. And of course, teaching 32 students who were wonderful and curious was incredibly fun. So that was probably the biggest lift, frankly, because that happened during work. And I did let my company know. And in fact, we billed the small sort of adjunct professor salary into work so that there was no conflict. That said, it was one of those things where we're fully integrated because I was there as a McCann leader. That's where sort of the revenue went. And I also really wanted to pour into NYU, build something that's meaningful and lasting, and pour into the students there. So it was sort of finding ways to adjust the schedule, to be creative so that I could do both with excellence. And then you asked about the book as well, Simon. That was a little bit different because that was something I was so passionate about. I'd been trying to write this book since sort of 2017, 2018, was asked to do a TEDx talk, my first one, and that's when I put the book on the back burner. Shortly after the talk, I realized, these stories I still are waiting to be told at a deeper level. So I took a year off to write the book. And I think this really was a family decision because if you want to take a year off as the primary breadwinner, everybody has to buy into the plan and understand the puts and calls that we need to make as a family unit. And, within 1 year, to assume that a book will be finished, much less published, is pretty assumptive and bold. So I didn't hold any expectations. I just wanted to get those stories down. And I felt incredibly lucky that we did find a great agent, that we did sign on with a great publisher, and the book was essentially wrapped and sold so that I could go back to work. And that was what began sort of the next chapter with McCann World Group.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful story. And yeah, in terms of your role as an adjunct professor, and in terms of the book, I know the book was very well received. It was a big success. So congratulations on that. And I also
Thank
mentioned,
you.
Emily, just the children's villages, SOS.
Yes.
You do some work there too, right?
I've been on the board of directors for over 3 years now. And, frankly, I'm starting to pull back into more of an advisory role, but that was such a great opportunity because SOS Children's Villages is all about caring for children who don't have a home. So when they had heard about my book, it hadn't even been written yet, they reached out and said, we feel like we have a lot of congruency in our life philosophies. And I couldn't agree more. The background of SOS Children's is incredible. It was founded post-World War II by an Austrian man who looked around at the devastation and said, there are all these widows and all these children. Why not put them together in villages and have them care for each other? This allows children to stay with their siblings as well, which often is an issue with foster care. And I just love everything that this organization stands for. So it's been an absolute privilege to serve on the board. I did very early on have a chance to go see one of the villages myself in Florida, and the organization looks a little different in the U.S. than it does in Europe and Asia. I'm hoping to also go visit some of the villages in other parts of the world, but it's a pleasure to be able to support. And people talk about donating the proceeds. Look, you don't really make money as an author, let's be honest. So I didn't want to do that. That wasn't meaningful enough. So what I did is I said, look, every value of retail sales, so all $26 of every book, I'm donating to SOS Children's Villages. So that becomes part of my contribution as well. And it also, if I'm honest, allows me to talk a little bit more boldly about the book. It's so easy, isn't it, to talk about other people, lift them up, promote them. But somehow, I don't know about you guys, I struggle a little promoting myself. So when I know that the book is entirely philanthropic, it sort of unleashes me in a way to talk about it with a little bit more, courage and conviction.
And could you maybe just expand on that for me? I mean, just in terms of Tio, in terms of social legacy, because for people maybe not familiar with the story, it certainly does grip you. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a wonderful book, and it's something that's really important, and it helps people really define their sort of deeper intentions and your purpose. So could you maybe unpack that a little bit for me?
Sure. Of course. Thank you so much for saying that. So it started off as a story, so it started off as an anthology of stories. We've cared for 17 orphans and vulnerable children in our spare room over the last 23 years. And you mentioned Tao, he was the one who stayed with us the longest, over 3 years. And in fact, we were in our final stages of adopting him. He's a boy who was born with hydrocephalus and had significant physical and mental impairment. But we then found an amazing family who loved him and wanted to adopt him. So it's a long story. Read the book for it because I don't think we have time here. It, he really inspired me in many ways to write the book because what I wanted to share was not only these incredible stories of transformation of these kids who we've had the privilege of caring for in our spare room, but also just how absolutely abundant the joy is when you lean into contribution. So it sounds like, gosh, I don't have time to do this. I don't know how you fit that in. But in reality, if you lean into something that you can uniquely contribute toward a need that uniquely speaks to you, that is what I'm calling in the book your social legacy. And the spare room is just a euphemism for that. So fundamentally, without reading the book, what is your offer, your unique contribution, your bundle of characteristics, personality traits, experiences, plus what is your offense, that thing that really speaks to you, that makes you want to do something about it. At the intersection of those two things is your social legacy. And I really hope that the book not only shares stories, but it compels action. And so the end of each chapter is written with a series of self-reflective exercises. So the print is actually really great because it's sort of workbook style. So you write it down. You write down your offer, you write down your offense, your social legacy. Then you write an action plan. And there are questions on how you can take the first step, how you can hold yourself accountable, how you can set yourself up for success. So that's really become, I think, the part that took off a little bit more, Simon, because I think people don't just want to be inspired, they want to go do something, but they don't necessarily know what to do. And that's, again, what underpinned this very simple model. People either know what they have to contribute, but they're kind of not sure where to sort of direct it, or they know the thing that bothers them, but they think, what can I do? So if you can define your offer and your offense, then you find that you've sort of unlocked this new potential in your life. And that's why this not very sexy, but practical subtitle is all about defining your social legacy, live a more intentional life, and lead with authentic purpose. And those two lines are equally important to me. Living with intentionality means I am being purposeful, making choices, sometimes brutally, in where and how I spend my time in order to do the things that I think are the most important and most compelling with excellence. Equally, the second line, which is leading with authentic purpose, I discovered as a leader when I was being open about how I spend my personal time, when I brought some of these kids into the workplace and showed how Lainey's sharing siblinghood with strangers, it really unlocked a new level of relationship with my teams. They don't just see me as a boss, they don't just see me as a subordinate, they see me as a human. And I really think that if we're willing to be a little bit more vulnerable, we're willing to be more intentional about what we're bringing to the office, what we're sharing, it step changes our ability to lead.
Yeah, and I certainly would recommend that because it's a wonderful book for those very reasons, Emily. And I was looking at Ariana Huffington, who people would know from the Huffington Post, but now as the founder and CEO of Thrive Global. And there's some great work and some great content being produced by Thrive Global. But Ariana said
Yes.
that the spare room is a lighthouse in today's storm and a call to action for anyone seeking to live a more intentional, purposeful life. So I think with today's busy lifestyle, that's to be applauded. So I think it's a wonderful book. Congratulations on it, Emily. It's so important. Um,
Thank you.
I want to also change gear a little bit. I think we've had a wonderful journey through your career. You've worked with some of the world's biggest and best known brands. The work that you're doing on the creative side now, McCann is exceptional. You've a big team of creative people there, and the extra work that we've mentioned and the other areas of your life that you're involved in. But I wanted to maybe just show a little bit more about who Emily is as a person. And I like to ask my guests about their favorite books, the way they learn, their learning style. Is there a particular genre, author? And when I ask you that question, what springs to mind for you, Emily?
I love reading. So at any point in time, my Libby app has something like 15 to 20 books because I want to read at least one or two books. And I like listening to an audiobook at the same time, for long runs. The book that I just finished, which was wonderful, is What We Were Promised. I love books that are cross-cultural, that demonstrate a broader perspective taken on the world. I think it's something that as a parent that's really important to me, is helping my third culture kid see the world through the broadest lens possible as a global citizen. So there's a genre as well that I didn't even used to know about called speculative fiction. I've always loved dystopian books. I love sci-fi. I think this idea of where technology is going to take us is fascinating, and I love reading about it. I don't know, it starts to all feel somewhat similar, but this idea of speculative fiction is sort of a what if. There was a book, I think it was called Underground Airlines. What if the South had won? There's some great authors there that I've loved for years, like Murakami. So I think those are sort of the wide range of books that I love to read.
Yeah, speculative fiction is definitely a genre I should be looking into even more. And the book that you mentioned as well that you've just finished, What We Were Promised, is that what you said?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's Lucy Tan, right? I believe.
That's right. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
it.
that's a great story. Great story.
Do you know, just
Um,
in the very beginning, sorry to interrupt, there was this line that I just thought was so well crafted. Something like, from the mindset of a Chinese housekeeper, how she notices that in China, there's just one time zone, despite the huge landmass. And in the United States, there are three time zones. And she says, how presumptive of the Americans that they would think they can live in the past, the present, and the future all at once. Brilliant line.
that's a great line. That's very, very good. The other question I want to ask you is people that you admire, or a character trait, or people that have inspired you along the way, Emily.
There's so many people, and I've often given names, including my daughter. Today, I would say the thing that really inspires me about people is those who are bold enough to pursue originality. Originality is a hard thing to come across these days, isn't it? A lot of things you sort of feel like, oh, I know where this is going. I know where the story is going. I know what's going to happen next. But when you can find something that really still feels original, we were just introduced to this movie, my daughter and I, called The Hunt for the Wilder People. I loved it. We loved it so, so much. It felt so original. The storytelling was amazing. The casting was perfect. And, living in the creative world now, I just have a deeper appreciation than I used to in my sort of more corporate roles. It was bold. It was creative. It was courageous. It totally inspired me.
That's another great recommendation. We're getting some great recommendations here, Emily, as well. So I shall add that to my to watch list. So thank you.
Please do. It's great.
Um, what about advice, Emily? What's the best advice you've ever received, or is there advice that you end up sharing with people that you think people need to be aware of?
There's one that comes to mind very immediately, which is, again, going back to this word boldness. Be bold in your learning. What I mean by that, I just did my fourth TEDx talk for NYU. And one of the questions that came up is, how can I get the most out of my learning? And I thought that was just such a great question from a student, very intentional. And I just said, be bold. I think there's so many times in my own younger years, I wasn't bold in my learning. I was too keen and too focused on proving I was smart. I was too protective of my image, trying to show that I knew what was going on. I missed so many opportunities to learn. And I feel like I'm making up for lost time now. I'm constantly asking questions now. My daughter was observing, Mom, you ask so many questions. I said, I didn't value learning enough. And I didn't always know when I was learning from somebody. It would be after the fact I'd say, oh, I guess I picked that up in that X and Y conversation. But now I want to be so intentional about learning. So for younger people or for older people, be really bold in your learning. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to look stupid or vulnerable. I think that's the best way that we can grow. And as we learn, as we ask questions, I promise somebody nearby has the same question and maybe they didn't ask it, but they're going to benefit from you asking it.
I think that's wonderful advice. I couldn't agree more. What about as you look forward now, Emily, to the next 6 to 12 months? What are you passionate about? What are you hoping to achieve? What are you planning for?
There's so many things. I can't wait to teach my next course at NYU. I can't wait to contribute in so many different ways at work. But the thing that comes to mind most is the Spare Room book is being turned into a film, Simon. I don't know if I had shared that. I haven't kind of publicly talked about it very much. And I just came back from Sundance Film Festival because the film project has now been funded and we're looking to attach the right names, whether it's actor, director, or producer. So in my spare time, this is something that's been an amazing learning experience and so inspiring. What I really hope to achieve is to find a platform that allows us to talk about the Spare Room in a different way for those who, don't read books or don't like hard copies. A film is a very different way to tell stories and engage. So I'm super excited about that. And, walking away from Sundance, my first time going to the film festival, I learned so much. But something that I really took away is there's not only the opportunity to tell these stories, but there's the opportunity to inspire people to consider their own social legacy as well. But my daughter, being a third culture kid, half Chinese, half Korean, of American citizenship, having grown up in China, there's an interesting story there to tell that isn't often represented. And one of the key stories you mentioned in the beginning of this chat, Teo, is a boy with hydrocephalus. So being able to represent disabled children in film is also something that doesn't come along very often. So as I was sitting there at the film festival, the more I started recognizing all the different aspects of our story that will elevate such meaningful dialogue, I started to get really excited.
That is an exceptionally exciting 12 months ahead, Emily. I wish you all the very best with that. That's fantastic to hear. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
The last thing I want to ask you before we run out of time is there anything else that I haven't touched on or anything that you'd like to bring to the attention of our audience? And also, if people want to reach out and find out more about the book or more about the work that you do, where's the best place to direct people to, Emily?
Something that I'd like to mention. Okay, so if you followed me, I often have like blue and purple hair. Did you notice there's this new magenta color here? Because the Pantone color of 2023 is Viva Magenta. This I love because despite all the uncertainty, despite years of pandemic and all kinds of different policies in all kinds of different countries, we are choosing to live in boldness and vivacious energy. And I think that's wonderful. So let's embrace that. We're already, halfway through our first quarter. So I think we have this 1 year to go live out loud. And you can find me at my website, social-legacy.com. You can add my email there. You can also follow my socials at thespareroom.emilychang.
That's wonderful. And that brings us lovely to the end of this episode with Emily Chang. Although I think we could talk for days, Emily. It's been wonderful to have you as a guest here on the Global Discussion. Thank you to everybody who's been watching or listening around the world. Be sure to follow, like, subscribe, and do all the things we need you to do to help support this podcast. And I hope you'll join me back here for more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. Thank you so much, Emily. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you again today.
It was a joy. Thank you so much for having me, Simon.
Thanks, Emily.